Good afternoon and welcome. May the Lord give you his peace. Saint Josephine Bakhita really become one of my favorite saints in recent times. When Pope Benedict wrote his encyclical letter on hope, he featured her story in his encyclical. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. First of all, a little bit of a background of where she's from. I think we're all maybe a little bit aware of the suffering of Sudan in Africa, especially the Darfur region. We've had a couple of our friars in our community who have a missionary calling. Some people have a calling to just go and serve in like other countries and other cultures. That's not for everybody, but some do. So one of our guys was living in Sudan for a while, and a group of the brothers used to go and do ministry there. One of them kind of has a reputation for putting his foot in his mouth. And he tried to learn like greetings in the Jabu Arabic that they speak over there or whatever, and it came out really wrong. I'll leave it there. You got to be careful, right? You're trying to speak a language you don't actually know. You may say something that, oh, wow. I may have done that myself a few times. But it was interesting. One of our priests was living over there, and he was bouncing between Sudan and Kenya. And a couple of times he would come back just to like rest and, to check in. And it was interesting to hear the stories of even just recent times, to be living in a culture where it feels like the entire culture has PTSD. There's so much violence, so much killing, so much, and the people who are still alive are just really shattered. Even the bishops, the priests, it's like the brokenness is so profound, and the situation of somewhat typical of people living in that country, especially the Darfur region. So Saint Josephine Bakhita is coming from the 1800s, so even back then. And you may or may not know some of her story. When she was a little girl, she was kidnapped and sold into slavery, and she was treated terribly by a series of Muslim masters who would beat her and treat her terribly. Eventually, she was given to an Italian family that was in the area for like a Italian diplomatic corps, and they end up bringing her back to Italy, and she hears about this Jesus and about Christianity, and she has this beautiful conversion. First of all, because of the kindness of the Christians, that she was treated so differently from what she knew growing up as an abused slave. And then secondly, she encountered the story of Jesus's passion and death. And she recognized her own, like she had been scourged and beaten, and I guess she had a lot of scars. And that God would come and be scourged and beaten. And it moved her heart with pity so much that she not only converted to Catholicism, then she was granted her freedom, she also became a religious sister. So she had a religious vocation. She became this beautiful sister, and all sorts of amazing stories of her love, of her kindness. I guess she had a beautiful singing voice, and she loved to work with children, and was just an example, a great example of prayer and peace and joy and forgiveness. Again, Pope Benedict in his encyclical on hope features her story, which is amazing. When she was baptized and confirmed, she received the sacrament of confirmation from Bishop Giuseppe Sarto, who ended up going on to become Saint Pope Pius X. He was the one that confirmed her. So amazing story, just amazing. But also that for all the suffering and all the evil that she endured, she ended up not angry and bitter and vengeful, but she ended up, because of her love for Jesus and her understanding of what Jesus went through for us, that she was so grateful for Christianity. She was so grateful for Jesus that she was just so forgiving and loving and kind. And for her whole life, she prayed for her home country and her home people. She bore no grudges or resentment. Isn't that amazing? That has to be a work of grace. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of what we hear about in the first reading, the end. This is the end of the letter to the Hebrews. And there's a perspective here that God would furnish for us everything we need to carry out his holy will in our lives. That God would provide, God would supply whatever we need. And the reference here is the God who raised Jesus from the dead and by the blood of the covenant. So the meaning of that is that all of the graces we need, everything we receive, comes from the death and the resurrection of the Lord. And so on this day, we have this great example of a saint, had an unusual life story, but in her sufferings, it kind of makes her witness so powerful. What a powerful witness. What an inspiring example. You know, I don't know all of you here today, but I'm guessing none of us suffered that much. Wow, compared to what she went through growing up. And yet here she is. She in the end of life, she was very sick. She was in a wheelchair. She was suffering. And people commented on her. She was still joyful. She never complained because she was so busy being grateful to God. She didn't have time for anything else. So let's follow her example, huh? Every once in a while, you meet a person who kind of inspires you, and I think Saint Josephine Bakhita inspires me. I grew up Catholic, but she not growing up Catholic, when she finally became Catholic, she was so grateful for all the beautiful things about our Christian faith that maybe some of us, we grow up with it, we're not so aware of just how special it is to receive the gift of this faith in Jesus. Amen.